And the central part of the solution is not 100% renewables, mind you that's good too. The central part of the solution is we've got to move into emergency mode. It actually is too late for a bit of this and a bit of that and just doodling along. So, this is the key solution, moving into emergency mode like we do when there's a fire or a flood. And the great thing is with the school kids strike, one of Greta's amazing quotes is, she said, adults say we've got to give the kids hope. I don't want your hope. I want you to panic like I've been panicking. I want you to act like the house is on fire, because the house is on fire. So she's referring to this idea of emergency mode. You're sitting around the kitchen table, you're working out about this and paying the bills and planning tomorrow. Then the stove catches on fire, boom, everything else drops away, you're focused on the fire. You're working with other people till it's out. This is people cleaning up after the floods in Brisbane, and tens of thousands of people came out on the street just to get in the mud and clean it up. In emergencies, people do work together, as long as there's a chance, as long as there's a plan, as long as you can do the sandbags or organise the evacuation, people work together. So people say, oh, we can't make it, front page news, people get so sick of it. Well, think of in a war, when it's a matter of life and death. Well, just even think of the shootings in New Zealand. When it's a matter of life and death, it's front page every day. It's just that people do not realise this is a matter of life and death. Although, the encouraging news is, did you see The Guardian has raised already, just in a matter of days, $100,000 to do climate emergency reporting. Isn't that extraordinary? People are hungry to hear this stuff. People in their hearts know that this is an emergency. So, we move into emergency mode, and we've got to tell the truth about the scale and speed of what is needed. It's not just a bit of this and a bit of that and zero by 2050. It's a society-wide mobilisation of the type we have only ever seen in wartime, where, quite commonly, societies go from spending 2% of their budget on defence to spending 50% on defence in 2 or 3 years. And they don't put a tax on cars and hope that the factory will build tanks. They just go, sorry guys, you're not building cars anymore, you're building tanks. And sorry, you're not driving your car for fun anymore, we need the petrol. That's what you do when it's a matter of life and death. That's what we need to do. And in America, they started a campaign in 2015, which we were watching very closely, and it was picking up what David and Philip had said about World War II scale mobilisation, and they got people to pledge to mobilise. And we were watching it all through 2015, thinking, look, they're on the right track, but we just can't get people in Australia to pledge to mobilise. Like, people don't pledge, and I don't know, they don't mobilise either actually. But like within a matter of months, what they say, these climate mobilisation people say, is that can I come to it in a minute?
How about the CFA?
Yes, actually, sorry, we do mobilise. There we go. I shouldn't have said that. We do mobilise, but we don't talk about pledging to mobilise in the way that Americans apparently do. But yes, within a matter of only a few months, they, by having a brave and uncompromising, strong message, had found somebody who was a donor inside Bernie Sanders' primary campaign. They had got inside the campaign, persuaded Bernie Sanders to go for a World War II scale mobilisation instead of going for a carbon tax, which is what he was initially going to do. And as part of the deal, when he lost the primaries, Hillary's crew got all this stuff about we're going to do gas into their platform, and Bernie's crew got a World War II scale mobilisation. It's sitting there in the Democrats' platform. Not that anyone would know. But it's an incredible victory in a very short time of mobilising around a strong message. And now with AOC, the Green New Deal, this is a World War II scale mobilisation. And it's being debated, like it's being put up through the American Congress. Apparently it's got massive support across the political spectrum in America. So this is only just 3 or 4 years later. It's gone from, oh, this is something we can't even think of how to say it, to getting into the Democrats' platform, to possibly getting, well, there's still a few steps to go, but at least being talked about across America as a possibility. Unbelievable. Yes, of course we need all those zero emissions solutions. I can see the zero emissions book in the corner from earlier sessions. That's the ones that people know about. Now though, in our messaging, we've got to always go zero and drawdown, zero and drawdown. Stop making it hotter, start making it cooler. And the good news about that is, according to Hansen, at least James Hansen, is if we move fast to get to zero, we can do a lot of the drawdown that we need to do to get back to the safe zone with natural drawdown methods, with regenerative agriculture, fixing the soil and the land, and rewilding, letting nature grow back in forests and other kinds of vegetation. Make a large contribution. Like, we don't know, like, all these figures are very, very uncertain. But the longer we leave it, the harder it's going to be, and the more likely we're going to leave what Hansen calls the young people's burden. That is, that we won't have the capacity anymore to do the large part with natural methods. We're going to be having to build machines. And look, we possibly can, but it's going to be trillions of dollars. It's going to be an enormously hard task. And so that's why we've got to move fast. The stuff that we need to do to get the carbon back in the soil is stuff we have to do anyway, because we're actually depleting the soil so badly that even if climate was not an issue, we would have to fix it just to feed ourselves. So the UN says we've got 60 harvests left, 60 years of flooding the soil like we are, before it won't feed us. But fortunately, there's methods of getting the water back in the soil, which grow the vegetation, store the carbon, restore the nutrients. And the really exciting bit, and I think this is the wild card, you know, for the pessimists in the second back row, the wild card is that we still don't understand clouds very much in terms of their place in the climate model. And there are people saying that there are things to do with revegetating the land that can affect the small water cycle in that immediate vicinity, cool the land there, which is very helpful given the centre of Australia is going to be uninhabitable otherwise. But it also can drag the rain back over the land. As the land cools down, you get the rain back over it. Like, New Zealand used to be the land of the long white cloud, because it would have this cloud sitting over the land, and Australia used to have, the early settlers said, also these clouds sitting over the land. Now they just sit over the sea. It's because we've cleared the land, and now it's hot and it drives the rain out. There's lots of other things too about how we can rehydrate the land that might make this whole process easier and faster than we think. We just don't like to say easy. So, what are we going to do? We're going to try and get our councils to declare a climate emergency, but there's other stuff we can do as well. I'm going to talk about a range of political options here. The thing that's excited me is this new movement called the Extinction Rebellion. When I wrote the emergency booklet, the thing I wanted, well, one of the messages I wanted to give was to say, look, people will die. But I couldn't find a really catchy way to say it. But I think Extinction Rebellion is quite good. The problem is the risk of extinction for certainly a lot of creatures and possibly us, and the answer is actually rebellion. So I'll talk about that a bit more. There's a fellow in the UK who started that off, and he's an academic. He's just doing his PhD on civil disobedience. And his view, it's really just an opinion based on history, is that 500 people in jail is roughly equivalent to 1 million people on the street, and it's actually a hell of a lot easier to organise. We've done it quite a few times before. If you take a, in between figure, if even 5,000 people arrested, and you're starting to get your agenda up on the political horizon. And this is, again, is other research, Erica Chenoweth. When you think of all the big political movements where great big changes have happened, maybe you did see hundreds of thousands in the street, but that was really only 1 or 2 or 3% who were obsessed and really working on it. The others were coming along. So the question for you all, I guess you might be part of Gippsland's 1 to 3%, I hope so. And if you are, you see, that maybe is all that's needed, 1 to 3% of Gippsland to get this thing happening. Now, Paul Gilding is my favourite apocalyptic optimist, and this is an idea of his, that as well as climate tipping points, there are social tipping points. where you know you're working and you're working and you're working and nothing seems to be happening, and then boom, just suddenly it's happening. And I think that's where we're at with the climate emergency. Like it was hard, you know, 2007, 2008, 2010, it's just flogging along and nothing's happening, no one's picking it up. Since 2016, 15, 16, there's just stuff happening all over the place. And the school strike, I think in the end it was in 125 countries. Started with one girl in Sweden. And a lot of the message is very strong emergency message, you know, partly because Greta has got this incredible way of saying it. There's a friend down Geelong Way who first told me about Greta. He said, oh, you must watch out, there's this girl, you know, in Sweden, she's doing this school strike. And I looked at her and went, Nick, she's just one girl, I can't see why you're getting so excited. Anyway, he was right, I was wrong. There's something about how she said things, I think, that just has been like a spark, and now it's like a wildfire. It was 1.5 million kids last Friday, 1.5 million, 150,000 just in Australia. All down to Greta. So, like I was saying, there's been all sorts of successful movements, but really a lot of them involve some sort of disruptive civil disobedience. Even the suffragettes, you'd think, you know, votes for women, it should win with petitions or seeing the politicians, it should have been a pretty obvious kind of thing that would get through. But no, they did disruptive civil disobedience before they won. Martin Luther King, very brave civil disobedience. And these are the freedom riders, some of the ones that went to jail. So after America had said that segregation was no longer legal, still all the buses and the waiting rooms and the cafes down in the south were segregated. And so 13 very brave people got on a bus to test those practices and were horribly threatened. You know, the bus was burned, they were beaten up, the police stood by while the Ku Klux Klan just laid into them. And they got far down south till they got to the point where the bus drivers actually wouldn't take them anymore. You could understand their point. And they gave up. They were quite injured and quite demoralised. But what happened was that within days, people came from across America to take their places on those incredibly dangerous buses and continue on from where they'd left off. And one of them, there's some amazing videos actually on YouTube, it's really worth watching them. There's one guy who's talking about his decision to go and take this place on the bus, and he's from a family that has never been to university, and he's the first one, and he's coming up to his final exams, but he's deciding that the time has come that he has to leave aside those final exams and take his place on the bus. And his comment now in this video years later, he said, I was ready to do what it takes. And of course the buses were filled with hundreds and eventually hundreds and hundreds of people, and they were all, not all, but many getting arrested and many going to jail until the jails were full, and then they won. So we've got all sorts of examples in Australia too Australia and overseas of people, just even one person making a difference. This is somebody who went to jail in America for disrupting a gas lease auction with a false bid. That's why he's called Bidder 70, because he bid. And you can't see it very well, but this is just crowds and crowds of people. He went to jail and he wrote his letters from jail, but he mobilised just thousands and thousands of people, and the lease was actually cancelled. James Hansen, eminent climate scientist, actually has taken to getting himself arrested because he feels that he needs to make that personal stand as well as writing his scientific papers. And we've had one in Australia as well, named Jonathan, who wrote a fake ANZ press release that crashed Whitehaven Coal's price while he was actually protesting in the Laird Forest. So yeah, there's all sorts of peaceful, disruptive, direct action. This is people protesting against Downer, which was one of the companies that was going to help with the engineering for the Adani mine, but pulled out after disruptive protests. You might remember the Franklin River blockade, where that was really our jail moment, where people would just go up the river in little inflatable dinghies, all get arrested, all go to jail, and then the next lot would come down and do their non-violent direct action training. They go up the river in their dinghies, all get arrested, all go to jail until the jails were full. There's been amazing forest campaigns. We went on a tripod blocking trucks. Amazing gas campaigns, including some down here. Bentley blockade. Amazing action still going on with very brave young people up at Abbott Point and with the Adani mine. They just stopped the train line for a week just recently. Another Adani one. So now I come to the council. When we decided that we were going to start campaigning to declare a climate emergency, we were doing this thing of just getting all the candidates every election just to, do their pledge thing. And when the council election came around, we were asking all the candidates to pledge, but really all we expected to happen was that they might influence their political parties. If they were in Labor, they might tell Labor, to take more of a strong emergency stance. We were amazed at how many people, how many candidates, Labor, Greens, Independents, Animal Justice, a lot of the minor parties were prepared to sign. We ended up with more than half the candidates agreeing, and out of the ones that were elected, it was 2/3. And before we could really draw breath and go, well, what are we going to do now? They just went into the first council meeting and declared an emergency. So look, it's pretty much ever since then, it's just been running faster than we can almost. They went ahead and wrote a plan. They made it one of the overarching consideration in their policies. They did a climate emergency conference, which inspired a lot of other councils. And for a while it was sort of slow. It was just one council here and one council there, just sort of gradually spreading out in Australia. But when Bernie lost the primaries in America, the climate mobilisation picked up the council's campaign. They called it Local First. They started getting councils and cities in America to declare. And when Extinction Rebellion got going in the UK, they started doing it too. And now there's 370 councils, 370 around the world. And on the way here, I was talking to someone who's coming to visit and stay at our house. I don't know these people. It was one of the school strikers from South Australia. He's ringing up councils all over the world, getting them to declare an emergency. And he's working on one of the Pacific Islands, one of the Pacific Island nations, to see if they can be the first nation to declare a climate emergency. Just suddenly, there's people working on this in every corner. So Extinction Rebellion, that's the one I mentioned. It came out of a group in the UK called Rising Up, which included this Roger Hallam that I mentioned. And they specialised in this very disruptive, fairly confronting style of non-violent direct action with flares and a lot of chalk spray paint. This is just chalk. It's actually not, they're not actually permanently defacing the building, but it looks very dramatic. And that's Roger, despite his age, up on something doing it. He's also done hunger strikes, like long hunger strikes, 2-week hunger strikes. And yeah, this is another one, Gale. So again, more dramatic sort of chalk spray. This was a protest during the UK elections. Again, just with chalk spray. So apparently the police just stand there and laugh because they say, look, don't worry, we'll wash it off afterwards. But it's very dramatic. But in 2018, they decided they were going to not just do these smaller campaigns, like they were working on just things like getting the university to divest. But in 2018, they decided they were going to work on getting UK to declare a climate emergency. And they did talks like this, just all over UK. And the question they were asking was, given how serious it is, what are you prepared to do? Are you prepared to get arrested? Are you prepared to go to jail? That was their whole sort of focus in those talks. And they were getting about 20% signed up in each talk, which is pretty good. So then the people who signed up would do non-violent direct action training, and they'd form what's called an affinity group. And then they just did practice actions around London. So they'd get a group of 15 or 20 that had worked together and done the training together and trusted each other, and then they just blocked the street for a while, just to practice what it felt like, dealing with the police, dealing with the motorists. And the style they did was the motorists who were all banked up and likely to be getting angry, they were going and handing out cake and biscuits and flyers explaining to them and saying, look, don't worry, it won't be very long. And then they'd block the road. I always get the number wrong, but they block the road, I think, for 18 minutes and then come off for 2, something like that. So they'd let the really angry ones through, and the ones that didn't really know what was going on would come down, and then they'd be blocked and then go back on the road again. But then they'd do, give them things and talk nicely to them and say, don't worry, it won't be very long. And so they could cause massive disruption without really causing massive rage. They immediately went to the large NGOs, the environmental organisations, and they said, are you going to support us? Well, of course, they weren't. So this is them actually then going to Greenpeace with flowers and doing a sit-in at Greenpeace and just saying, why not? Do you agree it's an emergency or don't you? Again, this is quite unusual. So then at the end of October, they went to the Parliament and said that they were going to rebel unless the Parliament declared an emergency, and Greta came down from Sweden to launch it, so that George Monbiot was also at the launch. We didn't hear about it though, unless you were reading the British Guardian. It was in none of the Australian media. So then they kept on doing these, really quite confronting, small-scale disruptive actions. So this is with hands glued on. Oh, this is with Gail, I can't see it very well, climbing up onto this revolving door and then spray painting up the top. So, quite athletic, quite daring and quite confronting. They went and protested at the BBC, calling on them to tell the truth. And then on November the 17th, because the government of course had not declared a climate emergency, they blocked 5 bridges in London for quite a number of hours, and they offered just hundreds of people for arrest. They only got 83 arrested because the police ran out of room in the vans. There's this video of Roger going, can't you arrest us faster? But right from the start, they've had support from across the political spectrum and with some very respectable and influential people, including all sorts of faith groups. So what they're demanding is, they call it Extinction Rebellion, sometimes referred to as XR. Tell the truth, declare an emergency and initiate a World War II scale mobilisation, and as part of building a democracy fit for purpose, establish a People's Assembly. People often don't like the idea of declaring an emergency because totalitarian governments will do that to actually take away freedoms and to do stuff that people don't like. It sounds like a bit of a wussy kind of thing, a People's Assembly, but in fact it's been used very effectively in Ireland. In Ireland, when they wanted to do a referendum on abortion, and neither of the political parties has dared to do anything much because it was such a scary, difficult political topic. They set up a People's Assembly, just randomly selected people, sat them down, they came up with a way stronger motion than either of the political parties or major political parties would have done. And because it came from a People's Assembly, all sorts of people backed it and campaigned for it, and it went through. So it seems like a wussy sort of thing, a People's Assembly, but it's actually a model that's being tested around the world and works. So it's a non-violent campaign. You're meant to look after each other and build a culture that looks after people. And it's very decentralised. It's like Lock the Gate in the sense that if you agree with the principles and if you agree with the demands, you can pretty much set up a arrogant Extinction Rebellion group and campaign under the umbrella, making your own decisions. So yeah, one of the things they did was become part of this council emergency declaration thing. And now it's hundreds, 370 around the world. And now, and after that first wave in the UK, it's also spreading around the world. It's in 80 countries now, Extinction Rebellion, not doing anything much, just building. Like we're in the stage in all these other countries of going out and doing talks and getting ready for March and April. New Zealand's a bit ahead of us, so this is a really creative action they did in Canterbury, where they went to the Department of Water and the Environment, which I think is in the same department there, just with 5 or 6 people, and they were protesting some of the environmental destruction that they were acting on. And these activists just shot off the water to the building and locked themselves onto the water taps, these big tap things out the front. I think it's up over there. And again, it was really a very small action by a small number of people who were just going, I'm ready. I want to do something. And that woman, I love that. You know, it shows the Extinction Rebellion attitude. Like, you know, it's a very friendly, gentle, but passionate, strong attitude. This is their most recent action, and it's the start of the March-April rebellion that's going to be worldwide. This is Blood of Our Children, and it was front page of The Guardian. Very dramatic. It's fake blood, obviously, not real blood, and it's not really going to stain, it's not toxic. But front page of The Guardian, and in fact, nobody was arrested. Like, you know, again, dozens and dozens of people willing to be arrested, but the police has given up arresting them because they realise now they want to be arrested. So they got to be front page of The Guardian with this very poignant action, and in the end, nobody even was arrested. So I find it such an inspiring style of activism. So now it's spreading all over the world. We've got our Declaration Day where we go to various federal offices around the country this Friday and ask Australia to declare a climate emergency. And on the 15th of April, all 80 countries do whatever that they can do. No, see, it was 75 plus, it's 80 now. So yeah, we're going to try and rebel until we get a declaration of a climate emergency. And it sounds like an impossible dream, but when they were pledging to mobilise in 2015 in America, things have started to happen, so you never know. And so we're already practising just with some banner drops. And we did a little action outside the Murdoch Press. Yes, but this is the Greta quote. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if the house is on fire. So, this is coming back to the values approach that I was talking about earlier. You know, what is important to you? How do you want to be remembered? And yeah, I think we all want to be remembered for what we did rather than what we could have done but we didn't get around to it. This is a quote from Albert Einstein. The world is a dangerous place to live, not because of the people who are evil, but because of the people who don't do anything about it. So, if you wouldn't mind, just turn to the same people and see, like, there's lots of things that we can all do. It doesn't have to be disruptive civil disobedience, although if you wanted to form the Oregon Extinction Rebellion, I would be really very pleased. But, you know, whether it's pressuring your council or whether it's running some campaign in the election, the federal election, to get somebody in who will declare a climate emergency, whether it's getting a federal candidate to hold the thing, saying I pledge to declare a climate emergency. Turn to your neighbour, we've got just 5 minutes again, and so what are you prepared to do? What are you ready to do? And I mean, first of all, the thought will probably come, oh, I could do this, but it's a bit difficult. And I must say, I've been through that myself. I mean, I've been at some actions where I could have got arrested, but I really didn't want to, because being a psychologist, I'm going to have to go through this thing with my registration if I get a conviction. But I don't know, now I just thought about, well, like, do I care that much? Well, partly I'm getting older, it doesn't matter as much. But I also just think, like, there comes a time when you just got to do it. So once the feeling is I'm ready, but have a chat and see, you know, what are you ready to do? That's Clap 3 times and you're ready.